Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of the greatest to ever play this game. The master of the unstoppable skyhook, the most points in NBA history. 6 MVPs, 6 championships. He is overrated. And today I will explain why, but first let's set a couple ground rules for this video. Number 1, all respect to Kareem. I've had this video in my mind for a couple months now, and the big reason as to why I haven't done it is because I know Kareem is one of the nicest people on earth, and I don't want to come out as bashing him on this video. This video is simply highlighting aspects of his career that some people may have forgotten or don't even know about. Especially when we're comparing his career to other legends, these are aspects that people definitely need to know. And number 2, no one here is saying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is not great. After this video, he'll still be a top 10 player of all time. But that doesn't exclude you from not being overrated. You can be all of that and still be overrated. When people talk about Kareem, they immediately go into the fact that he is indeed the most accomplished player in history. And if you want to count college and high school, then no argument there, because he's won at all levels of basketball. But if we're specifically talking about NBA, I don't believe that is the case. It's easy to say if Jordan is the GOAT because of 6 rings and 5 MVPs, then by that logic, Kareem must be the GOAT with his 6 rings and 6 MVPs. But if we use our brains to look at the whole picture, let's just look at it from a quantifiable standpoint. Michael Jordan and Kareem have the same amount of championships. Cool. Kareem has 1 more MVP. Cool. But then let's look at finals MVPs. Kareem has 2 compared to MJ's 6. Let's look at scoring championships. Kareem has 4 compared to MJ's 10. Now, to be fair, Kareem does have more All-Stars, more All-NBA selections, more All-Defensive teams, and 1 more MVP. But now that we look at it side by side and look at what each other has over the other, MJ having 6 more scoring championships and 4 more finals MVPs clearly outweigh 5 All-Star appearances, 4 All-NBA selections, and 2 more All-Defensive teams, when those advantages that Kareem have are largely due to longevity more than anything. And if you even want to do it, you can include MJ's Defensive Player of the Year that Kareem doesn't have, but I'll give Kareem the benefit of the doubt because the award wasn't introduced until I believe 1982 or 1983. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far to say as Bill Russell is more accomplished than Kareem. Bill Russell played in a time where there were no all-defensive teams, no finals MVPs or Defensive Player of the Years, and blocks weren't being recorded. Now, I looked at this Reddit post to see how many finals MVPs Bill Russell would have won, and he estimated around 6, so we'll go with that. But I would even go as far as to say 7 because I think he deserved the last one as he was the player coach. But we'll go with 6. I would assume Russell would have made all defensive teams in all of those years as well. As far as Defensive Player of the Year, this Reddit post estimates 9 Defensive Player of the Years, so we'll go with that as well. Now, I know they didn't exist for a majority of Kareem's career as well, but I highly doubt that he would have won 9 Defensive Player of the Years before 1983 when they were introduced. So again, 11 championships to 6. 1 less MVP, but 5 more finals MVPs, and probably 4 to 5 more Defensive Player of the Years. And once again, all the advantages Kareem has is due to longevity, and having this guy may have something to do with it as well, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Alright, I'm making this editor's cut because as I'm editing this video, I'm kind of thinking to my head, how many players could have actually contested Kareem for Defensive Player of the Year? And let's just say they're not a lot. So Kareem actually might have won more Defensive Player of the Years than Bill Russell, but my point still stands. 5 more rings and way more finals MVPs is more impressive than Kareem's whole achievement list. But I'll get into why him not having competition in this time period is actually a bad thing. But what I want to talk about next is the quality of those achievements, because this is where we really need to dive into Kareem's career, where you find holes in it that simply can't be overlooked, but are. Kareem dominated the 70s, which is no easy feat. No one's saying that was something easy to do, but also no one is saying he's not a great player. But I would argue that this is the weakest era in NBA history. Kareem dominated an era in which the best players of the 60s were either old or retired, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Bill Russell, Elgin Baylor, Jerry Lucas, Walt Bellamy, Willis Reed. All of those players were either aging, too old, or weren't even playing, and Oscar Robertson was on his team. And then you had Dr. J, George Gervin, Artis Gilmore, Rick Barry, guys that I legitimately think would have gave Kareem a run for the best player in the league, but were all playing in another league in the ABA until the merger. So this was a 5-year stretch where yes, Kareem was leading the Bucks to a perennial 60 wins, but with the upper end talent pool being the weakest it's ever been in the league. Kareem won 3 of those MVPs, competing with 33-year-old Jerry West, Dave Cowens, and Bob McAdoo. Most people don't even have Dave Cowens and Bob McAdoo in their top 50, and if they are, they're in the low 40s to 50s range. And in this stretch, he only won 1 championship. This was a stretch where the Bucks had Kareem, Oscar Robertson, All-Star Bob Dandridge, and 20-point per game scorer Lucius Allen. And while I get that the first year was his rookie year, his second year he did win a championship, which is great, actually amazing. In his third year, he would lose to a 69-win Lakers team, which again I get, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the future leading scorer in history with the most unstoppable move and unarguably apparently a top 5 scorer of all time, would put up 33 points and 17 rebounds, which at face value is amazing, but he'd shoot 46% from the field against a 35-year-old Wilt Chamberlain. Now 46% isn't bad for a guard, but if you consider that this is the league MVP that was shooting 57% from the field in the regular season, that is an extremely big drop-off. The next season, as the first seed in the West, they'd be a first-round exit, and Kareem played horrible, only scoring 23 points on 43% shooting from the field and 54% from the line. That is 7 less points per game, on 12% less shooting from the field and 21% less from the line compared to what he was putting up in the regular season. Now 1974 I excuse, because he played great in the finals, but 1975 and 1976 are the 2 pivotal years to this video. As in 1975, the Bucks would miss the playoffs, and in 1976, as he was traded to the Lakers, he would again miss the playoffs, but would still win MVP. Yes, comment section, I have watched this video, and he does make a great case for 1975, which is why I excuse Kareem for this year, as he had an eye injury in the beginning of the year, and the Bucks couldn't recover from their horrendous start. However, I disagree with this point on 1976. Yes, in 1976, yes, there were certain rules that prevented the Lakers from making the playoffs, but this is what it comes down to. Kareem played all 82 games that season, had Gail Goodrich and Lucius Allen, and couldn't lead his team to at least a winning record in his prime? Because the year after, he would lose Gail Goodrich and have a similar squad and would lead them to the first seed, which is great, but he couldn't lead them to over 576? And I find it weird that as soon as the merger happened, as Dr. J, David Thompson, and George Gervin would come in, as soon as Bill Walton came onto the scene, as soon as Moses Malone would come into his prime, Kareem would only win 1 MVP, and that was the first year after the merger, and would continue to struggle to get home court advantage on a team featuring Adrian Dantley, Jamal Wilkes, and Norm Nixon, until Magic Johnson came to the scene in 1980 and transformed that same team that Kareem was leading to 47 wins with 3 other 18-point per game scorers to 60 wins as soon as he came in, averaging 18 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds, and 2 steals. And I honestly think that despite Kareem putting up amazing numbers in the finals, the fact that Magic was a rookie, still put up 17 points, 9 assists, 10 rebounds, and 2 steals in the first 5 games, and put up the greatest playoff performance in NBA history as he took over for Kareem in Game 6 at center and put up 42 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 assists to win the championship on the road. I'm sorry, but that finals MVP should have went to Magic. And so from then on out, he would reap the benefits of playing with the greatest point guard and passer of all time, winning 5 championships as soon as he played with Magic, and scored 16,000 points of his 38,000 points with him. And speaking of the 38,000 points, this idea that you can't have a top 5 scorer of all time list without Kareem simply because he has the most points in history does not make sense. Because Karl Malone only had 1,500 less points compared to Kareem at the end of his career, a feat that he could have accomplished with one more healthy 20-point per game season. Yet most people would call you stupid to say that Karl Malone is one of the 5 greatest scorers in NBA history. Why? Because people know that the reason why Karl Malone is so high up on that list is 1, because he played with arguably the best passer of all time, and 2, he had longevity. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played with arguably also the greatest passer of all time and had insane longevity. And I also get that he has the skyhook, which is the most unstoppable move in NBA history. But Dirk Nowitzki also has the one-legged fadeaway, also the most unstoppable move in history. So why isn't he in the conversation more often? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated the weakest era in NBA history from 1960 and on. An era where the best players of the 60s were either retired or too old. An era where the players would give Kareem a run for the best player in the NBA was playing in a different league. And yet he still managed to win only 1 championship and was struggling to lead his team to a winning record in his prime. Kareem is still a great player, one of the greatest players to ever do it. And him winning a championship in his second year, putting up the numbers that he did, and being an all-star caliber player for so long is still some of the greatest achievements in basketball history. Which is why at the end of this video, to me, he is still a top 5 player of all time, unarguably a top 10 player of all time. Not gonna lie, the top 5 may be in question now, I'm not gonna lie. He's a great person, and his humanitarian efforts are to be commended for. But if you apply context into his numbers and his achievements, 6 rings, 6 MVPs, and the leading scorer in history simply isn't as good as it's touted out to be at face value. Those achievements are overrated.